Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. This is me, Nilofer Ali. I hope you all are doing great, and I hope you all are enjoying this beautiful day of Eid al-Adha. I'm wishing you all of you a very happy Eid. May Allah Almighty bless you with lot of happiness and success in this dunya and in the Akhirah. On this special day of Eid al-Adha, we have a special guest and a special personality, Sir Salvatore Steffano, and I'm really grateful to him took time out of his busy schedule and joined this live show. Sir Salvatore Steffano is really an inspiring and a courageous person who embodies perseverance and determination and despite enduring a very challenging and very emotional period, he emerged victorious through hard work, dedication, and unwavering hope. So let's talk to Sir Salvatore Stefano and learn how to face the challenges of life with a big smile. Hi, sir.
Hi, Nilafar. How are you doing today?
Alhamdulillah, sir. I'm fine, sir. What about you? How are you? How's your health?
No, every day is a good day. Praise God.
Sir, I want to extend my warm welcome to you and I express my gratitude for your presence here. Sir, our audience are very curious to know more about you. Could you please give us an introduction and share a bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Salvatore Steffano, as you may see on the screen there and heard already. I've been an entrepreneur for about 16 years now. You know, I grew up in a family business, but unfortunately, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, my dad, he got in me and him, we got in a bad car accident, and he broke his neck in that accident. And shortly after, he lost his business. And so I had left school at that time, and I was working, 2-3 jobs, working like serving tables, doing, selling phones in the mall. And, at that time, this was before like internet marketing was really a big thing. And it was back when like everything was just kind of a scam out there. Everybody was afraid to spend money online. And so I had spent about 2 years, after my shifts of work, I would go online and I would look for how to make money online. And finally, after 2 years of doing research and looking up different things, I decided that I was going to go ahead and get into graphic design and build websites in order to make money online. And so what I did was, and so how I got started with my first business, it was at about 20 years old when I first started. How I got started was I went to, they used to have, and this is for some of the old guys out there, but we called them internet marketing forums. And so these were basically websites where people would post different information. You could read it. It was like the old social media of the day before social media was a thing. And so you had these sections of the website that were called buy, sell, trade, or BST, where you could buy stuff, sell stuff, or trade with people. And so I noticed that the people who had gotten started on these websites, that were doing really well, I looked back and checked their history, and I saw that the ones that did well, the first thing they did was they offered free services to other people so that they could get a good reputation for the work they do. Right. And so at this time, I didn't have much graphic design skills. I spent, maybe a little bit of time in Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator, and I think it was called Dreamweaver, back then, where we built it on the Adobe platform, the websites. And so I learned some of those basics, and I offered my services for free, which, by the way, if you're just getting started and you don't really have the skills or the confidence in your skills, I highly, highly recommend that in order to get clients, the first thing you need to do is get real world experience and be able to showcase your skills, showcase your work, right? And so
Yes,
what happens today is you have a lot of like, these gurus that they call them out there that are telling you to go out and charge, $1,000 a month for ads or charge, $500 for doing a logo, whatever it may be, right? And they use all these examples of all these people who did it successfully. But a lot of times
yes,
they
sir.
don't tell you that the people who are able to sell things for those amounts, well, they have experience in the field, right? And they have the skills in order to charge that much. And so, unfortunately, a lot of them prey off of, other people's ignorance and not knowing, the industry. Okay. And so that's like one of the first things I want to tell anybody who's looking to get into, freelancing or being a digital nomad and working online and all that cool stuff is you
Yes,
got
sir.
to level up your skills. And one of the easiest ways to do this is, you can practice at home. There's all kinds of YouTube videos with downloads and stuff where you can practice, whatever your trade is, whatever you feel passionate about, right? And that you're good at. And then what you want to do is go out and offer to do it for free for some people. You can go to a Facebook group, you can go to LinkedIn groups,
Mm,
you can DM people. I suggest the groups because plenty of people will take you up on the offer. There's a lot of,
mm,
especially right now in the United right now. And so if you go to some of these different, U.S. Groups and you offer to do some of this work for free, you're probably going to get quite a bit of people who are interested. And as you do
yes, sir.
work for free for these people, you're going to build a portfolio, you're going to build your skills, and then little by little, you can charge more. And before you know it, you could be making an amazing income, more money than you had ever dreamed. And that's exactly, what happened to me. But for me, entrepreneurship is hard. It's tough, guys. It's
Mm,
not easy. It took me 10 years of doing everything wrong before I finally
mm,
built my first seven-figure business. And even after I built my first seven-figure business, and I'm talking USD here,
mm.
I still
Yes,
didn't
sir.
make that much money myself. I had to spend a lot of money on, labor and tools and
Mm,
paying other consultants to figure out stuff I didn't know. And so even then I didn't, right? And so it took me, even after I really learned how to generate a lot of revenue, it took me 3, 4, 5 more years before I learned how to actually get the profit margins, to be really good. And then to learn
mm.
how to not have to be, involved in the day
Yes, sir.
to day of the business and to be able to run a business and only have to work 5, 10 hours a week in that business, but that took me about 15, 16 years of hard work and, a lot of ups and downs. There was plenty of times where, I was so focused on money that my health suffered. I got really, really fat. Like I struggled with, alcohol and, drug abuse, because dealing with the stress, dealing with the pressure, because I always felt like I was in a rush to just keep growing and growing and growing. And like, I felt like I had to keep making more money to, keep fixing all the other problems I had created in my pursuit of making money. And so I think one of the big lessons I have to share here is to take it slow, enjoy what you're doing, because otherwise,
Mm,
what's the point of life? Because otherwise, one day you're going to wake up and you can have all the money in the world and you're just going to be miserable and you'll be without your health, because of all the stress that you put yourself through. And you might have
yes,
ruined a lot of good relationships in your life because you didn't spend the time with other people. And I had the tendency to say, well, I can't do this or I can't do that, especially with my now wife, who we've been together now 8 years, or almost 8 years actually. But I used to like not spend a lot of time with her and just say, well, I have to go to work so that I can provide for you and your daughter and all this stuff, right? And make all these
yes, sir.
excuses to why that I couldn't do this or I couldn't do that, and it always had to do with work.
Exactly, sir. Freelancing is on earning online is very difficult job. I must say, we don't earn the amount we are desiring to earn or we want to earn. So this is very difficult job. I would like to ask you that please share the details of your journey, including how you started earning online and entered in the field of digital business. And additionally, I would like to ask you that what motivated you to pursue this field?
Yeah, I'm sorry, what was the last part? What motivated me to do what?
Sir, I would like to ask you what motivated you, means why you choose this earning online.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So I first got into this, as mentioned earlier, because my dad broke his neck, and I needed to support my family, my little brother, my little sister, and so that's what started it. But what motivated me to keep doing it was, one of the things I had always kind of dreamed of was being, number one, just kind of being my own boss. My dad, he was an entrepreneur growing up, right? He had different businesses. He did okay for them. They provided for the family, but he always struggled with them. But so I learned lessons, young, working for him, construction. But for me, the goal was I always kind of wanted to just get away from everything and be able to, travel and, not worry about money and not worry about, for example, like exchange rate. The U.S. dollar, has been very strong for a long time, even though it might be getting a little bit weaker right now. There's some different, news on that. But, it was always my goal to go somewhere like, when I was younger, I wanted to go to the Philippines, for example, because a lot of people would talk about the Philippines, how it's beautiful. They got the beaches, the ocean and all that. And that the cost of living was really cheap, and then if you make American dollars and you live in another country, then you can use that exchange rate, to your advantage. And so that's some of the reasons why I got into digital marketing specifically for business. That being said, along the way, I've built many brick and mortar business or, physical businesses that weren't online. But even when I had those businesses that weren't necessarily online businesses, the digital marketing skills is what helped me get traffic and get leads and get sales into the business. And those skills also turned into good skills for, physical, stuff like, sending mailers out to people, right? And so, and doing like events and, locally and whatnot. Because once you understand the basics of marketing, whether it's online or whether it's in person or wherever it may be, you can use those skills anywhere, right? And so I went through, my first agency, if you can call it that. It ended pretty miserably for me. I spent about 2-3 years, building that agency, and basically I was just doing websites. I was doing graphics. I was doing I got very big into landing pages and conversion rate optimization, meaning I would, help people who already had they didn't call it sales funnels back then, but, somebody who already had a good sales funnel. And what I would do is, work on their landing page to help it, convert better, right? And so for me, that was very easy because a lot of people just didn't know the fundamentals and they just needed some little tweaks. And so, I got very good at that, but I had also, kind of gotten, dealt with all the stress. I had gotten, heavily into, drinking and doing other things I, shouldn't be doing because, I was a very broken kid and I didn't know how to deal with the trauma that I dealt with growing up. And so I gave it back to my family. So it wasn't like I kept all the money for myself. I gave it all back to my family. And because I never saw any of that money, it just felt like I was just stuck. And no matter what I did, no matter how much money I would make, like I felt at the time like my family would just blow the money, and like I would never see anything from it. And so I got very depressed, and it was the stress and depression and all the negative things that come with that caused me to close down the business. And in fact, there's been several businesses I've closed in my life because I was no longer happy doing what I was doing. It was never the money that was the issue. it was my own mental
Mhm.
health and physical health that became the issue. And
Yes,
so,
sir.
I went from that to, I would, and in between, I would like, have like maybe, a job here or there, right? But I went from that to then, like I started one day, I broke my phone. It was like a old Samsung Galaxy S3. And I remember, I didn't have enough money to really fix it, or I was like too cheap to want to pay somebody to fix it. And so I decided to fix it myself. And so after I learned how to fix it myself, I'm like, well, let me do this as a business. And so I had an idea that I would start a mobile phone repair company. And so what I did was I started, putting ads like on, Craigslist and, different, other places, right? Different directories and things like that you could do online. And I would also go to, stores, like cafes and bars and restaurants, wherever I could go into. And I would have like my phone repair kit in the car, and I would just walk in and I would give people flyers. And a lot of times, like I would, be able to do 3, 5, phone repairs in a day, and make
Yes,
that
sir.
money, and then so forth, right? And so that business was doing pretty well after just a couple months. But then I had decided to move from. I was living in Florida at the time. I decided to go move up with my brother up north in the U.S. in Minnesota. And so when I moved, I closed down that business. I went to work for another company for a while, and
Yes,
at
sir.
that point, I felt kind of pretty defeated. And it wasn't until I went to work for a company called Tech 80, which was an IT company. I started working as their sales and marketing director. And while I
Mhm.
was working for them, I picked up this book called Traction by Gino Wickman. Okay, so Traction by Gino Wickman talks about
Yes,
something
sir.
called the entrepreneurial operating system. And this operating system, which is like a whole system to run your entire business, is what actually motivated me to get back into business, after taking a couple years off, because it answered a lot of the questions for a lot of the work with, okay, cut out. All right, there you go. With having clarity in my business. Um, I didn't understand that there was different components, different processes or AKA fundamentals that are needed in order, for a business to grow past yourself, right? And so essentially the first 10 years of entrepreneurship, I was very good at going out and what they would say hustling and selling. And then I would do the work, and like a lot of it, I did everything myself. But once I
Yes,
picked
sir.
up this book and learned it while I was working at this company, I learned
Yes, sir.
some of the key fundamentals or foundations in order to grow a business past yourself and with, other people involved, right? And so where you can delegate work and hire people and they actually get the work done, and you don't have to stress about it anymore, and you can start working what they call on the business instead of in the business, right? And
Yes,
so
sir.
after that lesson, but by chance, they say like, things don't happen by chance. You go out and make your own luck, right? Because, you just keep moving forward and you don't give up. And so at this point in time, I had been a part of a group called Business Networkers International, or BNI, which is basically a business referral group. And so I'd given a lot of people, different referrals. And one of the guys I'd given, a few referrals throughout a couple of years or so, we were having, he
Yes,
asked me
sir.
to lunch one day, and he asked me, he's like, hey man, like, I know you've ran businesses before. I know you're really good at sales. I know you're good at marketing. Why don't you go ahead and open up another business again? And at that time, I had a limiting belief in my mindset
Mhm.
that the business yet, because this time I want to have working capital so I don't have to as soon as I make money, use that money to pay bills. I want to be able to reinvest it into the business. And so, crazy enough, he offered me, startup money to start up a business. And I did. And so instead of going into digital marketing like I was going to, I was talking to my oldest brother, and he's like, hey, there's this opportunity in the cell phone tower world, because that's his industry he worked in. And he's like, these, drones, you can fly a drone up and then take pictures of the tower and circle around it and take those pictures, put it into software and come up with 3D models. And we can give with the 3D models, we can give measurements, to engineers instead of having, people climb these, tall cell phone towers to get measurements. Okay. And so probably wasn't the best decision, but I went ahead and did it. Well, we got into that business, and it turns out because the technology was so new, nobody trusted the measurements that we were getting. And so we had a really hard time, selling it, even though we had figured out how to do this. And so at that time I was working, a job that I was making pretty good money. It was a 6-figure USD career in sales for one of the largest digital marketing, agencies in the world. This was after Tech 80, actually. And so I had left there to go from making, $100K plus a year to back down to, I was making like $30,000 a year. I was paying myself like, $2-3 grand a month. And about 4 or 5 months in, I couldn't pay myself anything because we ran out of money. And so what we had decided was to pivot. And now all of a sudden we went from trying to fly these drones to now, and once again, I was a very big guy at this time. I was like about 300 pounds or so. And we went from that to having to, climb cell phone towers and to do the work on top of them in order to make money. And so when I was doing this, this was in the freezing cold, like negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit in Minnesota, US. And I remember, asking myself, as I'm climbing up the tower, and keep in mind, I'm in all this snow gear, like I can hardly breathe. My goggles are fogging. It's very, very scary, like being up on these towers. And it's dangerous. You fall, you die. There is no second chances. And so I remember being up on top, and I'm just, I'm telling myself, God, what did I do wrong to be here? I was literally crying. And, every day that I had to climb those towers, in order to do it, I had to, psych myself up in my head. And I had to pretend in my mind, oh my gosh, I love this. This is amazing. Like I would literally tell myself that out loud. And it was so cold that we had these things they call them hot hands, which is like a little pack that you can break and it warms up, and you put them under your gloves and you put them in your boots. And that's how cold it was, right? To keep yourself warm. And the worst part is, I had surgery on my shoulders when I was a kid. When I was a teenager, right? So I lost all my sports scholarships. We didn't get into that. There's a lot more than just a car accident. But the point is, I would get to the top. Every time I would get to the top of the tower, I would be in so much pain, I would literally be in tears. And I couldn't even do any work I had to wait like 20, 30 minutes just to begin my work after getting to the top of the tower. And it was absolutely miserable. And so I had that. I had a lot of stress because I had investors that had invested a lot of money in order for us to buy the tools. I had to, to get trucks, to hire, because you had to hire crews, right? You had to pay people, and paying people in this industry is not cheap. And so, so I had that. I had, a lot of debt to worry about. And so I felt very stuck. And so eventually we got to a point, after the first year, we ended the year, we were at about $350,000 in revenue monthly. And so we had hit that point, and then the business was on track. It was going to go the next year to do $5-6 million a year, the next year that it was open. Unfortunately, I did all this work, but I had to get the money to invest back into the business to keep it going. I thought I had to dilute my shares because I owned 85% of the business in the beginning. And so I sold a lot of my shares to a point where I had less than 25% within the first year of my company. And unfortunately, as soon as the company started making money, I got kicked out of my own company. So you hear about like how Steve Jobs got kicked out of Apple, as a CEO. Well, here's the thing. Not only did I get kicked out of my own company as CEO, but, I got paid hardly anything, because I was in a desperate financial situation. I needed money. So I sold all my shares for very cheap back to the company. And so I don't say this because I regret it. I tell this story because after that, I had decided, wow, this is the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. It would be a breath of fresh air to get back to making money online. And so guess what I did?
This is a very long and journey of hard working.
Absolutely. And so after that, I got back into digital marketing. And since then, I've worked with I work with a lot of businesses. Mostly I work with a lot of businesses that are, brick and mortar businesses, local businesses. I went and, helped a gym out. They gave me a percentage of that business. I helped them blow that up. I sold it back to them. Partnered with other digital marketing agencies, helped them out. And, and now I like to do, a lot of consulting, helping people explain, where they're at, their current bottlenecks, what they need to do to get to where we've been. And so, long story short, got out of that and then, built a 7-figure agency, and then the profit margins, our gross profit, not net, but gross, was on average about 75%, every single month. And so I had a business partner in that. By the time we get down to net profit, we're looking at, after all expenses and taxes and all that, we're looking at 30%, 35% on a 7-figure business. So, it wasn't too bad, right? But even then with that business, I still was wrapped up in just chasing. And so started about a year ago where I felt like, okay, if I don't take care of my health, and start spending more time in my other relationships, like I'm going to lose everything and all the money in the world's not going to be worth it. And at that point I was pretty miserable, even with all the money. And that's because I built a business, that, how do I put it? I don't want to sound ungrateful here, but I had made a lot of, exceptions. I had let, basically, what's the word I'm looking for? I'd let people get away with a lot of stuff that weren't part of my business processes or my core values because I was so unhealthy that I didn't want to deal with it, right? And I was just kind of lazy in a way, because I was like, well, the business is doing fine. It's growing, month after month. It's making money. So I'm just going to go keep living my life and I'll show up to, a meeting or two a day, but, I kind of just let things kind of slide, by the wayside, if you will. And so after doing that for a while, the business got to a point where, expectations weren't very clear for new employees, for new clients. And what happened was, things just weren't running the same. Things weren't running on the same principles, in the way that I built the business. And over time, I begun to hate myself and hate the business for allowing it to get that way. And that pain inside, caused me to decide I woke up one day and I was just like, you know what? I don't want this business anymore. And, literally overnight, I decided to get rid of half the business. We fired half the employees, because we had to get rid of half the clients. And at that point, I thought, okay, I'm going to rebuild the foundation of this business. But after I did that, after a few months, I just decided it's not even worth it. It's got a bad foundation, this business. And I decided that it's going to be much easier and I'm going to live a much happier life if I just decide to go ahead and do something new and make sure that I actually love and enjoy what I'm doing and I'm passionate about it. And I make sure, more importantly, that I have a personal relationship with the people I'm working with, because with this business, I got so good at delegating that I didn't have to be the one be in the meetings to do this, to do that. I had people who were hiring people. I had people who were closing clients. So I didn't talk to clients. I didn't talk to most of my employees. I didn't know most of them. And so it was like a lifeless business. And so when my health got back, I was like, I don't want to be a part of this. Like, there's no soul in it. You know what I mean? And so I got out. And that's what I'm telling you. You can build something, that can make all the money in the world. But if you're not happy in it, what's the point? And that's what I did. I left a 7-figure business. I didn't even sell it because I didn't even want anything to do with it anymore. I didn't want the stress. I was just like, you know what? Like, it's completely gone. I'm going to keep focusing, on my health and getting better. And, in the last year, I went from over 300 pounds to 200 pounds now, and, I can breathe and I'm working out every day. And, me and my wife's relationship is better than it's ever been. I talk to friends and my family every day. I go on interviews like this, right? I talk to other people. I give, there's a lot of people I've given give free consulting to, that aren't doing as well, who need help. And, for me, that's important. And so, for me and my faith, and I think a lot of the main, the faiths in the world, a big component is freely teaching and helping others out, who are less fortunate. And so that's really what I've been dedicated to. And I'm not, even though I've made millions in business, I've made over 10 million in business. Like me and myself, I don't have, millions in the bank. I live pretty modestly. I live in, Thailand here. It costs me maybe $20,000 a year to live here, which is, it's a lot in Pakistan. But in the U.S., that's hardly nothing, right? Like, you can't live off $20,000 U.S. in the United States. And so now I try to, everything I do now is, it has to be right. There has to be a purpose behind it. Like, I don't want to work for soulless corporations anymore. Like, I used to work for these big franchises and corporations, and nothing, every month, like, they would just give you a hard time no matter how good you did. And God forbid you had a bad month, they'd be all on top of you. You could be 11 months out of the year that they do very well. And then 1 month is bad. And then they want to be at your throat. And so I no longer want to work with people like that. And so now I help people who have a purpose, who have a passion, and are doing things for God. Right. And, to me, that's what's important, is people who are going out there and they're doing God's work. And that's what I want to support. And I know, different parts of the world, we have different beliefs and different structures. But I believe that, there's no reason, why we all can't get along and help each other out and do things in the name of God, even if we have different names for God.
Sir, you are very hard work and you experience ups and downs of life and business. Sir, I would like to ask you that how much time is required to become successful and profitable? Because sir, we often want instant results. When thinking of something one day and acquired a significant wealth the next. So sir, what do you say about this?
So I would say, based on my experience and from other books and other mentors I've had, to really become an expert or master at what you do, it takes about, and once again, success is a different, people have different opinions of success. So I'm just going to say, to become an expert or master at what you do, you realistically need about 10,000 hours in what you do to become one of the best in the world. And by best in the world, I mean you're in the top 5, 10% of the top 1% of the world. And so it takes a long time. And that's why I'm telling you, you have to enjoy the journey that you're going through. Because it's like, if you're playing a video game right? And you get to the end of the video game and you win the game, there's nothing left.
Yes, sir.
And that's life. And so if you just have a goal of, let's say your goal is I want to make $1,000 a month, right? And as soon as you hit that goal of $1,000 a month, then it's going to be okay. What's next? Another thousand, another thousand, 10,000. It's never going to end.
Yes, sir.
And so what I tell people is one of the most important thing to do is to find your
Yes,
purpose
sir.
in life. And you have to look at where do I want to be 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now? How do I want people to remember me when I'm dead? And when you know the answer to that, work backwards, right? So let's say 20 years from now, you want to be known for, let's see, I know in Pakistan right now, the water is a big problem right now, right? And so let's say it's the
Yes,
water
sir.
crisis. And so what you have to do is look at, okay, so now where do I want to be in 10 years in order to hit that goal? Now, where
Yes,
do I
sir.
want to be in where can I be where does 3 years look like from now? What does 1 year look like from now? Okay, now to get to my 1 year goal, what do I need to do this quarter over the next 90 days? And in order to hit that, what numbers do I need to track every single week, right? And those numbers can be very simple, like, hey, I did this many outreach, or I spent, at least 10 hours this week on my skill. And then what
Yes,
you want to
sir.
do then is you want to work backwards from weekly to what am I going to do every single day? And that's the key is your habits, your daily habits is what's going to determine where you want to be. And so depending on, and this is why it's important to have a role model in life, right? So whoever your role model or role models are, look at them where they've been in their life and look at what they do every day, right? It doesn't
Yes, sir.
mean let's say it's Michael Jordan, for example. It doesn't mean you got to be as good as him right away. But
Yes,
guess what
sir.
Michael Jordan did every day? He practiced the basics. He dribbled, he did his, 3-pointers, he did his shots, passing. He practiced the fundamentals. And so one of my old wrestling coaches in high school, he used to tell me, the big mountains are made of small rocks and the small rocks are made of pebbles. Meaning you got to start with the little things make up the bigger things, and the bigger things make up the bigger things in life. And you see that in, math and in geometry, that everything comes down to, the building blocks, right? The atoms. And so if we're looking at business, if we're looking at career, or if we're looking at our dream or passion, we can't be in a hurry and put a time on when we want to be somewhere. That's going to bring stress. That's going to bring problems, because you're feeling pressure to hit a certain goal. But if you can just appreciate and enjoy that little thing you do every day, and you can design your life to where you wake up every day, and no matter how much you do or don't have, where you can enjoy your habits, right? That might be, hey, I enjoy going for a walk, reading a book, 10 minutes in a book every day. It can be, I enjoy cooking, right? And so you want to make sure that, you have a balance in your life. And that's one of the programs I'm working on right now. And so there's 4 pillars that you have in life, I believe. And I believe no matter who you are, you got to have faith, right? You got to have your fitness, both mental and physical. You got to be good with your finances. Got to be a good steward of your money, right? And it's not just making money. Okay, I've made a lot of money and I've blown a lot of money because I didn't know how to conserve it, and more importantly, I didn't know how to grow my money. So that's very important because you want to. It's not about what you make; it's about what you keep. And
Yes, sir.
then the last one here is family, right? And so with family, you have your inner family, your direct family, you have
Yes,
your
sir.
extended family, you have your
Yes, sir.
neighbors in your community, right?
Right, sir.
And then you have those in your faith, and then you have those outside of your faith. And
Yes,
so
sir.
at the end of the day, we're all family. We just might be, we're just disconnected all over the world, right? And so you have to put these different relationships first, because if all you do is spend time with your close family, well, you're not going to be very open-minded. You're going to be very closed off. And not only that, but what reward do you have if all you do is give and help your close family and you're not helping others who can't give back to you? Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Right,
So,
sir.
and
Exactly.
so balance, I'm telling you, that's key. And so if you take those 4 areas and you just make
Yes, sir.
one habit every day, you just pick one habit every day to do in those four areas, watch what
Right, sir.
happens in a year. Your life will change in just 1 year. But you got to be
Yes, sir.
consistent. I'm telling you, consistency is
Sir,
key. In fact, I call it consistent key.
one habit we practice one habit in 3 months.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that's what I'm saying. However long it takes. But what happens is once you start that one habit, you don't stop that habit. You add another habit on top of it. We call it habit stacking, right? And so
Yes,
it does. It takes about, they say 30 days, but that's right. I personally believe it takes about 90 days, at least for me, to really form a habit strong. And so the important part too is not just starting a habit, but it's also stopping the habits that are not moving you in the direction of your goal. And that's why it's important to have your life vision and to understand that. And so when you're younger, a lot of people will tell you, well, you're young, you're not going to know what you're going to want to do. I can tell you right now that that is absolutely not true. You can be young, you can be a kid and know exactly what you want to do when you grow up. Things might change and pivot as you get older, but generally speaking, you're probably going to keep moving in the same direction, and the younger you start, the better. Because even if you do change your goal, right, let's just say you're not sure, pick something that feels right with you, right? It might change in 5, 10, 20 years. It might change in a year. But at least you're doing something today and moving towards a goal. And even if that goal changes, it probably won't completely change. It's probably just you're still moving in the right direction. You're just going to move a little bit to the left or maybe a little bit to the right.
right, sir. Sir, I basically I am a student of biochemistry with an interest in nutrition. But sir, I also started my career in the field of graphic designing or earning online. So, sir, being a biochemistry student and with an interest in nutrition, I would like to ask you that how I utilize my skill and knowledge to earn online.
Absolutely. So there's many ways to apply your knowledge, in business and online and career. Many ways to do it. And that really depends on how you want to interact with people, right? So we all have different personality types. And so for me personally, I love talking to people one-on-one. I enjoy groups. What I don't enjoy doing is doing a done for you service for somebody else. I've come to realize that, right? Some people, they enjoy that kind of relationship, but I prefer teaching, I prefer educating people, and I prefer, working with people to help coach them and guide them, right? And I like doing that on a small scale. And so for your instance, you would have to figure out how you enjoy working with people. And so once you can figure out how you enjoy working with people, then that's how I would pursue it. So, for example, if you're the type of person you don't really like talking to people at all, right? You might be better off, taking your information and knowledge and creating a course on it, right? And then, I'm sorry?
Sir, I'm extrovert. I'm love to talk people and I'm very social extrovert.
Awesome.
Personality type.
So one of the
Right,
best
sir.
things you can do is what you're doing right now. Do these, what you can do is, and something I learned from Dennis Yu, but what you can do is go on other people's interviews, other people's podcasts to start, right? You don't even have to have your own platform, but you can, obviously. But go talk to other people who are experts in the field. Ask them about knowledge. Not only are you going to learn more, right, because you're dealing with people who know more than you, who have more experience, who have been more, but now you're seen next to those experts. So people are going to think that are going to relate to you being an as well. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Exactly, sir. Sir,
Yeah,
I watch your
exactly.
videos.
And what you can do then is, sorry, it's cutting out.
Sir,
All
I
right, so I was
watch
going to say what you can do next then is,
Yes, yes, sir. Continue, sir, please.
Looks like I'm losing you.
Please, sir.
It sounds like I'm losing you right now. The connection's getting bad.
So are you hearing me? Can you hear me, sir?
Okay, I can hear you now. It looks like we're back.
So next thing, what you are so what do you say about next thing? Second thing.
I'm sorry. What was that?
Can you hear me, sir? Can
Okay,
you hear
yeah,
me,
it
sir?
just keeps cutting in and out. I think it's good now, though. I think it's good now. Okay,
Yes,
repeat the
sir.
question.
Sir, anything you want to say? I think you are saying something.
Yeah, so I guess in closing statement here, what I would tell everybody here is the number one most important thing, and I really believe this, is don't give up on your dreams. I know that sounds like cliche and weird and like, overdone, but seriously, like don't, dreams can come true. They're called goals, right? If you make it your goal, your lifelong goal, it will happen. You can do it. With God, all
Yes,
things
sir.
are possible. And as long as what you're doing is helping, is good and it's done with love, and
Yes, sir.
there's no reason why you're not going to be able to accomplish what you want. And if head and start over again, you can still accomplish your dreams. It's never too late. I'd
Yes,
given
sir.
up many times. I'd fallen down and gotten back up. Times where I never thought I'd get back. When I was younger, I was very, depressed. I was even suicidal. There was a time where I tried to take my life when I was younger. Thankfully, God brought me back to life and saved me from that. But
Yes,
we all have a purpose on here, and once you understand that purpose, which is, I believe, it's related to our dreams,
yes, sir.
go ahead and accomplish it. Every people will give you hard times. People are going to hate on you. Don't worry about what other people say. That was one of my biggest problems my entire life. I was embarrassed. I felt like I wasn't good enough. I felt like everybody was better than me. I was very,
Yes,
very
sir.
tough on myself. And I was my worst enemy. And that's the biggest thing that's going to hold you back, is the person that looks back at you in the mirror. And so when you look in the mirror, you got to talk to yourself, like you got to talk to yourself well. When you hear that negative voice talking to you, just turn that thing around, like don't not let that negative self-talk in, because that is what's going to destroy you and your soul and your dreams and all of your hope. And that's when
Exactly,
life is no longer worth living, because you're not living your life anymore for yourself. You're doing everything for everybody else. And
yes,
nobody
sir.
else is going to understand you better than you, other than God himself.
Exactly, sir. Sir, I'm really impressed and inspired by you. Sir, if I would be honored to work under your supervision or your work for you. Sir, please let me know how I pursue this opportunity.
So right now, I don't. Right now, so I shut down the other business. I don't have any active businesses with employees at this moment. Um, but if I have anything that pops up, I'll let you guys know here in the future. Some things some working on some things, but it's probably going to be at least another 2-3 months. In the meantime, the best thing I can tell you guys is go out, get on these different groups. Facebook, LinkedIn, offer your services there. If you are just starting, offer them for free. If you have a little bit of skill, do it for a little bit less so you can get a reputation. Because one of the things when you're working in, whether it's the US, the UK, when people see people overseas, they feel like they're always scammers, and, they don't know you very well, right? And so it takes some time to break those barriers. And so that's the first thing you got to work on, is breaking those barriers. And you do that by providing value, which people will trust you, and then from there you can get referrals and use their report. You can use the work that you did, tag those people. And a lot of people, believe it or not, are willing to help you, but that some people, man, they're just afraid. They're afraid that they're going to get burned, they're going to get hurt because they don't know you, they don't trust you. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people overseas that are causing a bad name for others, that are working overseas. And so when people do stuff like that, it hurts everybody else. It makes it harder, right? And so that would be my suggestion. You can follow me on Facebook. I'll be sure to post, different job postings and hirings that I'm going to have. But yeah, at this time, yeah, I don't have things organized and structured yet to start bringing other people on at this moment. I'm still working on the new business concept I'm working on outside of my one-on-one consulting.
Yes, sir, inshallah, in future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sir, you have gone through a very tough time, a very hard time. Sir, what do you, I believe that hard time or challenging time bring blessings. So, sir, what do you say, what you have learned from the difficult time, and where do you see yourself if that time was not happened to you?
Okay. Where do I see myself here in the future? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, sir.
Oh, so for me, my mission is to help other people, other entrepreneurs, balance their life. I specifically, I enjoy working with men, just because, I don't have to worry about my wife getting jealous. Just kidding about that. But, I relate to men best just because, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a man. And so I believe when you help the men of the family out, the men of the house, and they're able to have, a transformation, that they're able to provide and help transform and share these things with the rest of their family. I'm very much more on the conservative side, where I still believe, I believe that men and women are equal, but I believe they are different. And I believe that it's the man's responsibility to take care of his family ultimately, right? And when the man is well trained and equipped and balanced in the 4 areas of life that I talk about, well, yes, then he's going to be able to be a blessing to his family, to his community, and to those of his faith as well.
Yes, sir, exactly. Sir, you're right. We are similar, but there are some differences between men and women.
Exactly.
Sir,
and as I say, we need to learn to embrace those differences and be okay with those differences. And, I know this is not politically correct, but we're in a world now, I don't know about there, but I know especially in the U.S., where there's a bunch of confusion going on. And, it's very prophetic what's going on in the world nowadays, right? Whether you're reading the Quran, whether you're reading the Bible, whatever you believe, this stuff that's happening right now has been predicted. And, and I believe that, God is calling, men of faith to stand up, and to teach what's right in spite of the adversity right now that's going on in the cancel culture and all that.
And sir, your wife don't need to jealous because I'm your sister.
Absolutely. We're all brothers and sisters here. Those who are for us are not against us.
Sir, I would like to ask you that what do you learn from difficult time you go through, and what do you say? Where do you see yourself if that time was not happened?
What do I see myself if that won't happen?
What if that difficult time not happened? Where do you see yourself? Means what do you learn from that difficult time?
Oh, okay, yeah. So the biggest thing that I've learned, is to be humble, to be balanced in life,
exactly.
To put people come first in life, no matter what. You got to put people first, people over profits. Don't beat yourself up.
Yes,
when you get down, when things go wrong, instead of looking at, blaming yourself for everything, just look at what happened, logically, and then figure out how to prevent that from happening next time. And what you do is when you do that, now you start building systems, right? And so instead of just having systems and processes for business, have systems and processes for your life. One of the things that I love doing, and I think is very important, is being very aware and conscious of the moment that you're in right now, and give the moment that you're in your undivided attention. Stop worrying about the past. Stop worrying about the future. You know,
Yes, sir.
they say 95% of your time we're on just autopilot. We don't think. We just wake up, we shower, we go to work. Like you don't think, right? And they say 5% of your time you actually think. I believe we need to flip that around to where 5% of the time we're on autopilot, and 95% of the time we should be actively engaged and paying attention. Like if we're talking to somebody, right, don't be on your phone checking everything. And I'm guilty of it. I struggle with that a lot. That's one of my toughest addictions right now, because everything's on my phone, and I don't even get on a computer most of the time. Like right now I'm on my phone. I use my phone for everything. And so it's very, very hard for me to stay away from that. And so, when I'm talking to people now, like I put it away. I started a couple years ago. I turn off all my notifications, so that way I don't get, bothered. And so I do all these things, but it's still, it's still challenging, right? And so pay attention, to life. Otherwise, life is going to pass you by, and you're going to wake up and you're going to regret that you didn't spend more time paying attention to those that you love and the people around you. And, selfishness is the ultimate way to self-destruction, and misery. I can tell you that right now.
Sir, my second last question. Sir, I visited your Facebook profile. Sir, I saw two things. I noticed two things, that you posted a very delicious foods on your Facebook profile, and you discussed about nutritional value. Sir, it shows two things about you. That first, you are foodie, and second thing, that you are very concerned about eating healthy. So, sir, I would like to ask you two things, two questions about you. That what is your favorite dish, and what is the importance of eating healthy? Because I am also interested in nutrition, and my subject is also nutrition. That's why I am asking these questions.
What's my favorite healthy dish or unhealthy dish? So, all right. So one of my favorites of all time. Okay. So one of my favorites of all time is pizza. That's one of my favorites.
Sir, mine too. Sir, mine too.
That being said, I don't eat it all that often. And I've also have learned alternative ways to make it a lot more healthy than is traditionally done. And so nowadays, for me, like if I stay away from a lot of junk and, junk carbs and bad carbs and stuff. And I tend to eat very low carb because it helps, with my brain fog and headaches and things like that. And so one of my favorite things to eat, believe it or not, is soups now. I love some soups with some like bone broth, right? So here I'm in Thailand. So my favorite dish here in Thailand is called tom yum. So tom yum gai, which is chicken tom yum. So it's basically like a kind of like a sour soup. And then you can get it with a little bit of, curry in it as well, if you like. And then, it's got different vegetables and things. And so that's probably one of my favorites now. That's like actually like a healthy dish, right? And then what was the second question?
Sir, what is the importance of eating healthy?
What for eating healthy?
Sir, anything means what is the importance of eating healthy? What do you say about it?
Well,
Yes,
I
sir.
mean, it's been said a million times, but health is wealth. It really is. But you can
Right, sir.
have all the money in the world, but if you're not healthy, you're gonna spend all of your wealth to get back your health.
Eat healthy, we shouldn't need to take medicines.
Yeah, well, food is medicine, and this is what I tell people is if you treat your food like medicine, right? In order to do that, you have to understand your body, and if you listen
Yes,
to your body will tell you what food you need and what food you don't. If you go to smell food and it doesn't smell good,
yes,
your body's probably telling you not to eat it, right? Especially if you normally like it. And same thing if you taste it, And so if it tastes good and it smells good, and this isn't always, when we're talking, real food, right? Well, when you eat real food and you eat the right kinds and the right amounts and at the right time, right? Because there's certain periods of time of the day we
Yes, sir.
shouldn't eat, like before going to sleep. I fast every single day, intermittent fast. I do water fast. I do dry fasting. I believe fasting is, very important, but
Yes,
not to take
I
it to the
agree.
extreme to where you're hurting yourself and your body. But,
Yes,
so we
sir.
always got to be balanced, right? But, once again, when it comes to food, it's like one of the things a lot of people do is they wake up and they eat right away. And, from my studies and understanding, and once again, there's always an exception to the rule when I'm talking because everybody's different. But for the most part, you shouldn't, most people probably shouldn't be eating until the sun is at about noon or at its highest peak, right? And
Yes,
that's
sir.
something that I've learned through, studying a lot of different scriptures and the faiths and, science, right? And so when you combine not just eating the right foods at the right time, right, but in the right quantities, just like medicine, you don't want to take too many pills. If you eat too much, for example, like spinach, right, that's very big in the US. People love spinach. But if you have too much spinach and you eat it too often and you don't cook it and prepare it the right way, right, you can get very sick from spinach.
Yes, sir.
Certain people with different mental health issues, like tomatoes, for example, or grapes or stuff that have this, that red coloring can be bad for them. And so,
Yes, sir.
just because a food comes out of the ground or out of a tree or, is considered healthy doesn't mean it's healthy for you. And it doesn't mean that it's healthy to be eating it all the time. There's also certain seasons we should be eating
Yes, sir.
certain foods, and depending on what climates we live in, there's certain foods that
Yes,
are
sir.
better for us, right? And if we're ill, there's certain foods that are better for us. I believe,
Exactly.
there's different cultures, but I know that like the Indians, they do a very good job of breaking down, they have like three different types of foods, they call them. I forgot I can't recall the names, but they got three different types. And some of these foods, they say, hey, you can eat this all the time. These foods,
Yes,
you
sir.
should use them sparingly. And these foods, you should never have because they're junk. They're poison for you, right? And so, if you take care of your health, right, and not just it's not just physical. You can look good, you can be skinny, you can still be very unhealthy because your
Yes,
mental
sir.
health is a part of that, right? And so when
Yes.
you combine the physical health with your mental, and then you have your spiritual health, well, when you
Yes,
get
sir.
all three of those, it's game over.
And
You're going to be able to do anything because you're aligned with God's spirit, right? And what you're doing. And you got the physical body to do it, and you got the mental health to deal with the stress, and you have the capacity to do much more than somebody who's unhealthy.
and so what positive changes bring when we do workout or maintain our health and fitness?
Yeah. So when we are doing our health and fitness, are you asking me how we should do that?
No, sir, what is the importance and what positive outcomes or positive results of maintaining health and fitness?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, just your quality of life is dramatically going to go through the roof. You're able to serve God and serve other people to a higher capacity. So
Yes, sir.
that's one of the things that got me on this journey. It wasn't just that like I was sick and feeling bad, but it was, I was reading a book. It's by, this lady named Ellen G. White. It's called Counsels on Diet and Health.
Yes,
And
sir.
in this book, she talks about, we can't serve God, let alone other people, truly, truly,
Yes,
unless
sir.
we're at our potential for our physical health and our mental health, right?
Yes,
Because
sir. I
when we
agree,
have
sir.
those things, you know, it's amazing what human beings are capable to do. And unfortunately, we live in a world where there's a few selfish, greedy people at the top pillars of society who have built
Right.
these, call me conspiracy theorists, but they've built these systems of control to keep people poor, to keep people
Yes, sir.
sick, to keep people uneducated. And these things, like the health systems, like the food systems, like the medical systems, and once again, I can only speak for, the US specifically, but, well, I can speak for more countries that I've been to, but I haven't been to Pakistan. But the point I'm trying to make is everything in the world is set to keep us down in life so that we can't rise up
Yeah,
and live to our true calling. And so it is tough. We are fighting that. But that's why I say, that's why it's important to have faith and to have belief in God, because he's the one who gets us through those hard times where we feel like we can't do it anymore. But at the same token, are we truly being faithful to our beliefs if we're not being the best version of ourselves that we possibly can? I know very specifically, I agree with a lot of things, that are touched in the Quran. And unfortunately, where I come from in the U.S., a lot of people, they don't follow, what we call the biblical health principles, as found in the Old Testament, which talk about, your health, like clean foods and unclean foods. Like, I believe in all that. And it's true. When I stopped eating unclean foods and started eating what you call halal foods, right? Well, my health was significantly better. When I drank not too much water, but enough water, when I made sure I had the right electrolytes and minerals, and you had the right balance. And, there's just, that's what I'm talking about, balance, right? You could have too much vitamins or too much minerals in your body from certain foods, and that can make you sick. It can get you very sick, and that's why I tell people just about anything on this planet, there's stuff that's very healthy at the right dose, and it's very unhealthy. Like formaldehyde is very toxic, right? But it's actually naturally occurring and found in humans, but at a very, 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 very small level. And so that's kind of how life is.
Yes, sir. Everything is good when it is up to according to daily recommended allowance. If we are eating much, any excess or anything we low cause problems.
Yeah, it's about yeah, exactly. We got to
Yes,
eat the
sir.
right things.
Sir, I do walk on daily basis 30 minutes and do some exercise. So, sir, is this enough, or we should need to do more intense workout?
Sure. So it depends. It depends on you, your situation, your goals. Typically, though, you want to be active, every day, right? You
Yes,
should be on
sir.
your feet. They say it's good to be on your feet like 8 to 10 hours a day, right? It's good to, make sure like walking is very important. If you just get enough good walk in every single day and you're on your feet, you don't have to do intense exercise. Intense exercise isn't necessarily good for you. I'm not saying like it's necessarily bad, but once again, it depends on your situation, why you're training, what your goals are. But there is links to high intensity exercises with decreased lifespan because you're putting stress and pressure on your body. I enjoy it because it helps, clear my brain in the day. I wake up personally, I go swimming every day for at least like 10, 15 minutes.
Yes, sir.
I'm actually training for a triathlon. So like one of my goals is to become a professional athlete now. So I'm training for the Ironman contests. But so I wake up, I swim, I do, breath work and meditation and prayer. I, do weightlifting, and then I do, elliptical is one of my favorite, right? And then I go around and I walk around, and so between all those things, it's helped me a lot with my health. And, I had a lot of weight to lose and stuff. So I had to do things very intense, and my goals are different. But your average person, who isn't, training to be an athlete or
Yes,
it's
sir.
very simple. Just, be active, right?
Thank you.
Eat the right foods at the right times and the right quantities. Treat it like medicine. Make
Yes,
sure you
sir.
get fresh air. Make sure you get sunlight. Once again, not too much. You guys have
Yes,
plenty of
sir.
sun over there. Got to be careful, right?
Yes,
And,
sir.
and there's a couple other foundational things. Talk to people every day. Like that's a big thing that's going to help you, believe it or not, with the physical is,
Yes,
having
sir.
communication, meeting new people who believe things differently. If anything, you're going to learn, what they believe in and, their thoughts and ideas. And you can take those things, what's bad, what's not good for you, that you
Yes,
don't
sir.
believe in or doesn't apply, and then take the good things, right? And that's how we learn, and that's how we become like, it's important to be like children, just be very open-minded. But, be careful, be open-minded, but, you got to be careful. There's a lot of snakes out there that'll, try to take advantage and teach you the wrong stuff as well. And fortunately, that comes in well, I don't want to get deep into it, but, it comes in the form of these different systems that are out there, that don't want us to succeed.
Sir, my health is not so good, so and I'm not fatty. I don't need to lose weight. So I think this is enough for me to do walk and some exercise for a few minutes, 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So, if you're not trying to lose weight, right, and you're on the opposite side, well, and let's say somebody's trying to gain weight, right? Let's say somebody's, really skinny and then they're maybe malnutrition, they need to gain weight. Well, the biggest thing that contributes to weight loss and weight gain more than anything else is our hormones. Okay. And so when our hormones are unbalanced, we either gain weight easily or we lose weight easily. The goal of our hormones is to balance things out. And so one of the reasons why I love fasting, one of the effects of fasting is it helps balance your hormones out regardless of what side you're at. Now, if you're like skinny and like you're under 10% body fat, I do not recommend doing any extended fast, for a long period of time. But doing, working yourself up a little bit at a time with your fasting, maybe up to 2-3 days for a water fast or a dry fast, can help regulate, and reset those hormones. The other thing is your food is very important, right? So if, what you eat is going to really affect your hormones, because what happens is our brain, and many people don't know this, but a lot of the chemicals, people think that the like dopamine and serotonin and all these different things, they think they're produced in their brain, but they're not. It's in your stomach. And so one of the things that fasting does is it's like a furnace. It burns up, the stuff in your butt, in your gut biome. It gets rid of a lot of bad, unhealthy cells in your body. And I could talk about fasting all day. I'm a big proponent of it. But the point is, it's like a reset, right? And then the most important thing to do after you're fasting is how you refeed yourself. And so when you refeed yourself properly, which that's a whole science to it right there, but when you take your time slowly and you introduce the right foods and, liquids and, minerals and vitamins and bacteria, the good bacteria into your body again, well, then your body has a new foundation to start building from. And so, and that's how you can kind of reset a lot of different health issues. And so, believe it or not, that's what I learned a lot about fasting, from different faiths, different scriptures, and when you read about it, it talks about things like, fasting and praying is one of the ways to get rid of certain, demons or, viruses or diseases. And so for me, I took that to heart, and, it turns out that the science that we know now backs that up, that we're able to remove ourselves of these afflictions through fasting and prayer, because fasting, I believe too, on a spiritual side, strengthens our connection with God. And when we can hear God's voice better, well, he's able to do more with us, because now we can listen to God within us, God speaking to us.
Right, sir. Sir, I really enjoy talking to you, and this session is very informative and very interesting. Thank you so much, sir, for your time and your cooperation. May God bless you. May Allah invite you a healthy life. So, sir, in the last, I would like to say what your message to our viewers.
Oh man, so my message would be, put your health first above everything else, because it's not selfish to put your health first. Yes, God tells us that we need to put our health first, that our body is the temple of God, right? And when we put our health first, we are putting God first. We're putting everybody else first, because we're going to be happy, we're going to be healthy, and we're not going to, we're going to be able to deal with the stress of life so much better than if we're unhealthy. And so please put that first. Take your time, in your life here. Do not worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about where money is going to come, how you're going to survive. Focus
Yes, sir.
on today and the problems of today, and focus on those, improving your daily habits, and you're going to get there much faster than you will by rushing it. It's the get rich quick stuff. It might work at first and you might think that you're doing well, but it's going to take you longer in the long run. So you know the plan for the future, but live today.
Right,
Keep
sir.
balanced. Keep your life balanced in the four
Exactly.
core areas.
Exactly, sir. Uh, Sorry, sir. Plan for future, like, but live in the present.
Exactly. You got it.
Right,
If
sir.
you do that, you're going to do great.
Right. Thank you so much, sir, for your time.
Thank you so
So we
much.
have
Bye-bye, Nilfar. Have a good day, everybody.
so we have Sir Salvatore Steffano. Inshallah, in our next program, we will come with again with an amazing guest. Till then, Allah Hafiz, and once again, Eid Mubarak.